Welcome, villagers, to the village hidden in the stories. I'm your guide, All Kage, the creator and author of all the what-if stories you see on this channel, with your awesome suggestions, of course. I write, edit, and produce every story you hear, so if you're wondering who made it, it's me. I hope you enjoy today's video. Be sure to leave your what-if ideas in the comments and subscribe if you're new. Today's story is What If Naruto Was in the Owl House Part 5. Which took me longer than expected, but I tried a bit at certain parts to get everything just how I wanted it. This is also where the shipping wars can officially begin, so for those who still are watching up to 5. Tell me who you think Naruto is going to end up with. Before we dive in, shout out time. Thanks so much to everyone who comments, keep them coming. And our second shout outs for my Shinobi Patreon members, Omar and Francios Lyman, a special thanks to them. As always, thanks for the support. If you'd like to support the channel, check out my Patreon, link in the description. Now, without further ado, let's jump into this what if. Part 5, Best Side of Hex Side. A stray ray of sunlight stabbed straight into Naruto's eyes. He winced, scrunching them shut, trying to burrow back into sleep, trying desperately to escape the glare, only for his body to betray him and blink awake anyway. For a few seconds he just lay there, confused why he'd woken up at all, until the real weirdness hit him. He was in a bed. He stared at the mattress beneath him, unfamiliar and almost suspicious. Naruto rarely slept in anything structured, he usually curled up wherever he dropped. He never needed this kind of furniture. Then came the second weird thing, he was still in human form. He almost never woke up like that. It felt wrong, like wearing someone else's skin. And the third, and final, thing was the warmth. Not his. Something warm pressed against his back, and his chest. A presence that felt foreign, soft, wrong in a way that made his heartbeat go uneven. He didn't want to look, he really didn't, but the feeling started to crawl up his spine, a pressure, a heat, a breath. He finally turned his gaze downward. Two shapes lay pressed against him. They looked like people, but not quite, faceless silhouettes molded from nothing, bodies shaped just enough to resemble the two women he'd been thinking about far more than he'd ever admit aloud. The moment his mind recognized those similarities, Naruto's heart flipped violently. His blood pressure spiked so fast he thought he might explode. Before he could even process the scene, before panic or embarrassment or anything else could settle, a sudden cry split the air, a caw, a hoot, a screech, he couldn't even tell, because the sound dragged his eyes upward, and a talon tore him in half. There wasn't even time for pain, not really, because he jolted awake. Naruto let out a long, low groan and flopped back onto the couch cushions. Yeah, he was definitely ignoring that dream. Nope, he wasn't unpacking that, he wasn't touching that, he wasn't even looking in its general direction. And still, he understood exactly why he'd had it. With everything going on lately, his brain was basically begging him to think about stuff he absolutely did not want to think about. So he shoved the whole thing aside and forced himself to rewind the last few days instead, starting after the library incident. According to Luz, he'd talked sense into Amity. Which, sure, he had been trying to do, but hearing Luz say it out loud, how she used what he said to talk with Amity, had made something in him twist in a way he pretended not to notice. The day after the library had been slow, well, it started slow. It ended with one of the funniest things he'd seen in weeks. Luz, Ida, and King had managed to body swap themselves into a disaster. And unlike last time, Naruto refused to get involved, because Ida once swapped bodies with him and used his shape-shifting for questionable personal errands. He still hadn't forgiven her for the raccoon incident. So instead of helping, he oversaw the chaos like a bored referee and added his own rule: whoever bailed first had to clean the entire house, plus Hootie. Naturally, they all bailed, spectacularly. Watching the parade of people they'd wronged group up, compare grievances, and then get immediately turned on each other as the swaps continued? Honestly, one of the best shows on the aisles. Even better when Lilith ended up swapped with a confused hound. A few days later, He managed to get Luz into Hexside for the upcoming semester. A miracle achieved only because of his deal with Principal Bump, and he also spent 2 hours convincing Ida to allow Luz to join Hexside. He was still annoyed about that part. And then there'd been the little misadventure with Ida and Lilith, a scam artist, a cursed map, and some monster that thought it could digest 3 very bad meal choices. Rookie mistake. 2 powerful witches and 1 demon fox. They ruined its whole afternoon. What stuck with Naruto wasn't the fight, though. It was Lilith, specifically, Lilith calling him nephew. He still wasn't sure how he felt about that. However, something else stuck with him, what he'd overheard from Lilith. She knew Ida's curse was getting worse, and Lilith had made a deal with the Emperor to fix it if she brought Ida in, to bow to his coven system, to how to him. Naruto told her straight, even if she beat Ida into the ground, Ida would never bow to the Emperor or his coven system. Lilith knew that, but she was still going to try. And that made Naruto think. At the convention, he'd felt the Emperor's influence, everywhere, even without the guy showing his face. Everyone talked like he ruled the Isles, but nobody actually knew anything about him. Not his face, not his motives, nothing. All Naruto knew was the same thing everyone else did: the Emperor ran everything. And somehow, that made him even more dangerous. But all of that, every scrap of the last week, only brought him back to the real problem, his new seal system. Naruto sighed and rubbed his temples. He'd already redesigned the thing 5 times. 5, in 1 week. He was pretty sure he'd fixed all the old mistakes, and the new design was solid, strong, cleaner than anything he'd made before. But he still needed the hair of the Slither Beast and the blood of a basilisk. Both mixed with the last of his normal ink, would replace the chakra ink he'd used up 7 years ago. The Slither Beast lived on the knee, a giant, territorial guardian who would not be thrilled about him taking so much as a single strand of hair. And he needed at least a pinch. Enough to grind down and mix right. The basilisk was worse, a magic-eating shapeshifter that treated spells like appetizers and witches like dessert. Rare, hard to find, always hostile. But its blood was the only thing that would give the ink the chakra conductivity he needed. Basically, his plan was a pipe dream. Any sane person would scrap it. But then there was that feeling in his chest, the one that had woken up in him during the duel with Amity. The one he didn't recognize but couldn't shake. A push, a drive, a need to get stronger, different from anything he'd felt before. It made it easy for him to decide he was doing this anyway. Start with the Slither Beast. At least he knew where it was. Decision made, Naruto's thoughts drifted, unwelcome, back to the dream. He shifted into human form without thinking, staring at his hands. The black nails, the faint fur on the back of his knuckles, both slowly disappearing, allowing the weight of his fox ears twitch atop his head. Then he touched his whisker marks, rubbing them as if they'd tell him something. But they didn't. It was the warmth, the memory of warmth, that lingered under his hoodie. Another new feeling, or feelings. Ones that had been creeping in ever since Luz showed up in his life. He didn't understand them. And worse, he wasn't sure he wanted to. Naruto, listen to this. Luz's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. He blinked, realizing she'd been sitting beside him the whole time, and he hadn't even noticed. He really needed to stop doing that. Luz held up a Hexside pamphlet with one hand while scratching King's head with the other. She was laser-focused on the paper but still absent-mindedly pampering the tiny demon. Hexside is one of the most prestigious magic schools around, she said once Naruto met her eyes. They teach spells, hexes, demonic literature. Isn't that amazing? Naruto chuckled. Sounds like a lot of work, honestly. He leaned back against the couch. Luz kept reading, taking her hand off King for half a second, instantly setting him off. What about this? She continued excitedly, but King shot up with an irritated glare. Hey, less reading, more scratching. Luz gave a sheepish smile. Sorry, King, but now that I'm gonna be a student at Hexside, I want to learn everything about it. You get that, right? King was already gone, well, mentally. Physically, he had stolen Luz's pamphlet and was tearing it apart with wild enthusiasm. Luz froze, Naruto laughed. Before she could pry it out of King's mouth, the front door blasted open. "Hello freeloaders," Ida drawled, smirking as she strolled in. "Guess what today is?" "Is it your birthday?" Luz asked. "Is it my birthday?" King chimed. "It better be a break day." Naruto muttered. "It's my birthday," Hooty screeched from the doorframe. "No," Ida said, kicking the door shut behind her. "It's Human Treasure Day." She tossed the portal door into the air. It unfolded mid-spin, opened, and Albert swooped through dragging a bulging sack. The moment he landed, the sack ripped open, dumping a mountain of human trash onto the floor. The portal snapped shut behind it. Of course it is, Naruto thought. Ida climbed onto the garbage like a queen claiming her throne. King dove in right after her, rummaging until he unearthed a bunch of old teddy bears. "Gimme gimme, yes, another worthy addition to my army of terror." He stared at the plushie with growing disgust. Truly horrifying. Naruto stayed reclined on the couch, eyes closed. Luz sat beside him, determinedly reading the half-destroyed remnants of her pamphlet. Ida glanced back at them. "Yo kids, your trash pile's getting cold, and mine's getting hot." Neither moved. Luz at least responded. "You can have my trash." A moment later she gasped, eyes widening. "Whoa, did you know Hexside was built on the bones of its rival school, one it literally conquered?" She held up the mangled pamphlet. It showed a younger Principal Bump standing triumphantly over defeated rivals as the opposing school burned behind him. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Ida just preened in the mirror. "Yep, I know all that. I went there, most harrowing years of my life." Luz's excitement only grew. Can you imagine it? Me in the halls of Hexside, studying with Willow and Gus, maybe Amity. She suddenly gasped again. "Amity, oh man, we're supposed to meet at the market so I can get my Ashura book back." She jumped to her feet. "Come on, Naruto, we gotta go." Naruto perked up, shifted into his fox form, and hopped onto her shoulder. Luz sprinted for the door, then skidded back to yank it open again. "Love you guys," she shouted before slamming it shut and running off toward the market. Luz sprinted down the path, boots slapping against the dirt as the market came into view. Naruto clung to her shoulder in fox form, his tail streaming behind him like flags in the wind. After a moment he shifted back to human, jogging beside her with easy, steady steps. For a few seconds they ran in silence. Luz was focused. Naruto was thinking. He finally glanced at her. "Hey, why'd you even let Amity borrow your Ashura book? Isn't it like your favorite thing ever?" Luz kept running but didn't hesitate, because she's a fan too, a real one. And it felt like a good way to reach out. She huffed as she dodged a cart. "You were right about her. There's more going on with Amity than the whole perfect prodigy thing." Naruto hummed, considering that, changing Amity's whole attitude in one night with a book? Who was he kidding? If anyone could do it, it'd be Luz with a dramatic fantasy novel with sapphic undertones. He perked up. "When you get it back, you should read it to me." Luz stumbled for half a step, staring at him like he'd just spoken in tongues. "Wait, you read Ashura out loud?" She blinked hard. Naruto, you and Ida said the language was needlessly flowery and trying too hard to be magical. Naruto shrugged, completely unbothered. "I probably misjudged it if Amity likes it, plus," his eyes shifted away for a moment. "We need something else to talk about. I'm kinda running out of past stories." Luz slowed just enough to look at him properly, confusion melting into something warm. "You want to read Ashura with me?" "Yeah," he said simply. "Why not?" Luz's smile stretched wide, bright, delighted, and just a little smug. "Naruto Uzumaki, you are finally choosing culture." Naruto snorted, "Don't push it." They picked up their pace again, the market now buzzing just ahead of them. Luz sprinted into the market square, boots slapping the stone, her breath coming out in little excited puffs. The place was bustling, witches haggling over glowing fruits, vendors shouting prices over bubbling cauldrons, spell components dripping from hooks. Luz scanned the crowd, and spotted her. Amity Blight stood in full casual mode, a long loose black shirt with sleeves hanging past her wrists, dark purple pants tucked into simple black witch shoes. A bright pink pendant rested against her chest, flashing in the sun with every shift, and a violet satchel hung neatly at her side. Luz's smile went bright and warm immediately, 2 seconds away from turning into a full sprint straight at her. Then, "Hi, Luz." 2 figures popped up right in front of her. Luz yelped, flailing backwards as Naruto launched himself off her shoulder and landed on her head like a startled, fuzzy little hat. The Blight twins grinned down at her, pure gremlin energy. When Luz hit the ground, the twins laughed. Amira leaned forward, eyes shimmering with mischief as she looked at Naruto. "And hello to you, fox boy." Her hand lifted like she wanted to pet him. Naruto dodged immediately, fur prickling. Why does she look at me like I'm some kind of plush toy? Sure, he chose this smaller fox form for mobility, but this was not the energy he wanted. Especially not from her. Before he could intervene, or before the twins could escalate further, Amity rushed over. "Move," she snapped, shoving Amira and Edric aside. They only chuckled. She offered Luz a hand and helped her up, steadying Naruto in the process. "I'm sorry," Amity said, tone dropping into genuine apology. They insisted on coming along to say hi. Then she looked at Naruto, giving a small, polite smile. "Good to see you, Naruto." There was something in that tone he couldn't place. But everything else he could see. Amity didn't look like she had a few days ago. Not cold, not sealed off, not trying so hard to be the perfect prodigy. The mask was still there, but softened. Whatever happened between her and Luz at the library, it worked. His talking to her probably helped too, but he wasn't confident in his people skills enough to believe he was the main reason. Still, he smiled. "Good to see you too, Mittens." Amity's face didn't move for a half second, and then she turned bright red just as Edric and Amira swooped in. "We love you, Mittens," they chanted, pressing their cheeks against hers and trapping her in a sibling smush. Luz burst into giggles. "Stop it," Amity barked, shoving them away. In the same breath, she straightened her hair and slipped back into her practiced calm. They've been extra protective lately, trying to make up for the library incident. Edric leaned in, guilt softening his expression, "and we still apologize every day." She shoved him too. "In any case," she said quickly, pulling the Good Witch Azura 5 from her satchel, "here's your book." Luz accepted it carefully, smile stretching wider. "So, what did you think?" Amity froze, shoulders tightening. It was fine, I guess." Luz flipped through the pages as Naruto watched from atop her head, until she spotted something wedged inside. A sketch, a rough drawing of Amity in a dress, leaning toward a fox-themed book character like she was about to kiss him. Luz's eyes went wide with playful mischief. "It was so fine you drew yourself with Menma the mysterious fox whisperer?" Amity combusted, she summoned a spell circle, and a burst of purple fire turned the drawing to dust instantly. Luz smirked, Naruto snorted a tiny laugh. And no, Naruto absolutely did not notice the implication. "This is great," Luz burst out, excitement shooting right past teasing. "Maybe we can even start an Azura club at school when we're classmates." Amity blinked. "When we're what?" Luz blinked back, realizing she forgot to actually say the thing, then her grin returned full force. Surprise, she held out her Hex-side pamphlet. "I'm enrolling at Hex-side." Amity's face lit up, surprise, then subtle joy Naruto instantly caught, before it abruptly dimmed into disappointment. "That sounds great," she said gently, "but to be in the class I'm taking this semester, you need to pass the placement exam. You have to show skill in at least 2 types of magic." Luz's smile slipped, just a little. Amity continued, "I know you have your light thing, and its variations. But if you can't show another type, they'll put you in the baby class. Do you know anything else? The question hit Luz like a punch. Naruto saw her whole body stiffen. Before she could speak. Quit giving her a hard time, Mittens, Amira said. Yeah, Edric added. Of course she knows 2 types of magic. He turned to Luz. Right? Luz forced out a shaky laugh. Of course I know 2 types, totally. Amity nodded softly. Well, I guess I'll see you in class then. I have to get going, me, and Ed have training. Edric's eyes lit up. Oh, idea. He dropped to one knee in front of Amity while Amira leaned on her head again, trapping her between them. What if we all train together, Amira suggested. We could show off what we know. Edric grinned. What do you say, Luz? Luz froze like a startled deer. Naruto could practically see the panic. She had just lied. There was no universe where she survived a training session with the Blights without being exposed instantly. Naruto stepped in. Actually, he said, tail flicking, we already have training planned with the owl lady, far away. We should get going, right now. He nudged Luz with his head. Oh, yes, Luz said, voice climbing into panic range. We have to go, bye. She sprinted off. Naruto clung to her hair for balance, both of them vanishing around a corner while the Blight siblings stared after them. Once they were safely out of sight, Luz exhaled hard. Thanks for the save. Naruto yawned. Don't mention it, I know you're terrible at lying. Luz burst through the door of the owl house at full speed, skidding across the floor as she sprinted straight for the kitchen. EDA, she yelled, panic in her voice. Naruto flopped on her head like a lazy hat, ears flicking but making no effort to get down. Committed to the theatrics, he murmured, voice flat. They reached the kitchen, where Ida stood over her cauldron on the table, fire crackling beneath it. She muttered to herself as if the world outside didn't exist. Luz didn't pause. Ida, you have to teach me a new spell right now. Ida groaned, a half-smile tugging at her mouth. Silence ruined, again, she muttered. Kid, busy. Vegetables won't cook themselves. She gestured at a haphazard pile on the table. She dumped a potion over them. The vegetables sprouted arms and legs. Ida smirked and pointed toward the cauldron like a general issuing orders. The vegetables bolted in terror. Naruto raised an eyebrow. And you thought that would work after the other times? Why? His voice was low, sharp, but amused. He slid off Luz's head onto the table, landing silently. Luz clasped her hands desperately. Ida, please. I need to learn a spell today, or I might get put in a bad class at Heck's side. Naruto flicked his tails, voice calm. She needs 2 magic types, 1 isn't enough. You can see she's worked up, yeah? Luz nodded vigorously. Yes, exactly, please Ida. Ida waved a hand. I already taught you enough witch stuff. Didn't I? Luz lifted a glyph. I can do light magic. I recorded you that one time, and Naruto helped me make variations, but that's still 1 type. Ida blinked. Whose fault is that? Yours, Luz said instantly. Ida paused, then laughed, loud and genuine. True, that is my fault. Naruto shifted to human form beside them, expression neutral. Just 1 spell, any spell, she needs this. Ida waved a hand dismissively. Still busy, she stirred the cauldron. Naruto's ears twitched slightly. He didn't flinch, he rarely did. He didn't complain, but internally, this is almost laziness, almost unnecessary, but okay. Then Luz tried her card. What will people think, she said sweetly. When they find out the most powerful witch on the Isles has an apprentice who gets put in the baby class because she refused to teach her? Ida froze. Naruto caught the tiny twitch in her shoulders. Yep, that worked, Ida smirked. Nice try, pride doesn't get played that easily. Naruto thought, flat-faced, she's cracked, just a little. He gave the tiniest push, so the rumors are true. Owl lady, sloppy enough to get caught eventually. That did it. Ida spun, fine, we'll train, but two magic types, boot camp style. The kitchen door slammed open. King pranced in, boot camp, I volunteer to run it. We rise at dawn, you'll carry me while I yell about your performance. Ida immediately shut that down, no, Luz goes weird when you're cute, and she needs focus, you're too adorable. I am not adorable, King stomped. Naruto watched deadpan, Luz whispered, ah, he stamped his little foot. King squealed, stormed out, slammed the door, reopened, slammed, again. It finally stayed closed. Ida exhaled, you're not coming either. Naruto blinked, what? You in fox form, distracting. You're being laziness, even more distracting. Luz won't be able to focus from that either. Naruto's eyes narrowed, I was planning to help her. Ida folded her arms, you can do that later. But now, you find something else. You survived without her before, you wanted training. This counts. Naruto glanced at Luz, she looked surprised, then thoughtful, not upset. Not disappointed, just trusting, his fox form would distract her, his usual laziness would too. She needs focus more than him right now, and he has something he need to take care of anyway. She doesn't need me for this, fine. He shifted back into fox form, tail swishing. Alright, he said finally. But whatever she learns, I'll help her master it later, like with the light spell. Luz smiled, relieved. Naruto hopped off the table, padding toward the hallway. Ida clapped, boot camp awaits kid. Naruto walked into the living room, tail swishing lightly, thinking to himself. He wasn't going to stick around the house while Luz trained with Ida. The slither beast should still be somewhere near the knee, a cold, snowy stretch of the Isles, dotted with ruins and forest. If he moved carefully, he could sneak close enough to get the pinch of hair he needed for the seal. His tails flicked, one snaking over to the couch to grab his notepad, the sketches for his new seal clutched between its tip and claws. Time to get started. He jogged for the door, Hootie stretching out of the doorframe, tilting his face close to Naruto's. Where are you going? He asked, that same hollow, unnerving curiosity. Out, guard the house while I'm gone, Naruto replied flatly, slamming the door behind him before vanishing into the forest. Hootie stayed perched in the doorframe, watching. An hour later, Naruto reached the outskirts of the knee of the Boiling Isles, a mountain formed by the Titan's bent leg, rising cold and desolate. Perfect for the slither beast. He moved through the forest, leaping from tree to tree in a slightly larger version of his fox form, optimized for speed and agility. He needed to cover ground fast, first the trees, then the ruins, then the whole knee, efficiency was key. Something caught his eye, he dropped into a clearing, wide enough for a beast this size, scanning quickly. Nothing, not here, but it had been. His gaze landed on a stone near the edge of the clearing. Shifting into human form, he grabbed his notepad and slid it into his hoodie pocket. He approached the rock. The dirt beneath it was disturbed. The stone had been moved, not much, but enough to indicate something large had lain on it and left in a hurry, close. Naruto's ears twitched. He shifted back into fox form, muscles coiling, and leapt back into the trees, ready to follow the trail. Luz lay half buried in the snow, sinking deeper every time she shifted, bundled in borrowed winter gear that felt 2 sizes too big. Her back pressed awkwardly against a broken stone slab jutting from the ruins behind her, its surface cracked and worn smooth by time. Snow clung to the ancient pillars around them, piled high where they'd collapsed and dusted thin where they still stood. Crooked and exposed beneath the bright, unforgiving sun. They looked exactly how Luz felt, tall, broken, and painfully obvious. Ida was sprawled right beside her, arms folded behind her head like this was a beach instead of the frozen knee of a dead titan. Above them, the sky was blindingly clear, the light reflecting off the snow until it almost hurt to look at. They'd come all the way up the knee of the Boiling Isles for this. Ida had explained it on the way, how the first witches used to travel here to develop their magic, how the land itself was saturated with old power. If Luz was going to find her next spell, Ida was sure it would be here. What Ida hadn't planned for was company. Luz carefully peeked over the edge of the ruin. Yep, still there. Down the slope below them, a small camp had been set up in a clearing. Amity stood near the center of it, bundled in her own snow gear, posture straight and composed even at a distance. Edric and Amira flanked her, sitting on a log and waving enthusiastically the second they noticed Luz looking. They were staring directly at her. They saw me, of course they saw me. Luz sank lower into the snow, wishing, desperately, that it would just swallow her whole. She had already lied to the group about knowing multiple types of magic. She still didn't even know if she and Amity were officially friends yet. A conversation right now felt like a disaster waiting to happen. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to rationalize. Hiding is already weird, staying hidden will make it worse. And, they're training too, it's not that strange, right? Right. With a long, shaky sigh, Luz pushed herself up out of the snow and stood, waving awkwardly but sincerely in their direction. Ida cracked one eye open. Who are you waving at, kid? Before Luz could answer, she grabbed Ida's sleeve and hauled her up too. Okay, be cool. That's Amity and her siblings, Edric and Amira. Amity's the reason I found out I needed to learn more spells. Ida blinked, processing that, then shrugged and waved anyway. Huh, neat. They didn't have to wait long. Amity was suddenly standing in front of them, snow crunching under her boots. You mentioned learning spells? Luz flinched. Ida immediately stepped in. Oh yeah, Luz here's, learning lots of stuff. Advanced stuff, very serious, very, secret. Luz stared at her. That did not sound good. Amity's brow furrowed slightly, clearly interpreting that in the worst possible way. Ida, blissfully unaware, patted Luz on the shoulder. Anyway, I'm gonna, check the perimeter. And with that, she slipped off, leaving Luz alone behind the rubble. Smooth, real smooth. Luz cleared her throat and stepped forward. So, what are you guys doing out here? Amity hesitated, stumbling over her words for just a second before her usual polished composure slid back into place. I needed a location with high ambient magic. I'm working on mastering fire and ice magic, alongside abomination control. To beat our exam scores, Amira added cheerfully. Edric grinned, which she won't. They bumped fists, laughing. Because, Amira continued, she's got a better chance of kissing Fox Boy than topping us. They high-fived again. Amity's face went scarlet. That's not. Luz blinked. What? Amity straightened immediately, cheeks still burning. What about you? What are you training for? Edric leaned in. Yeah, it's gotta be something powerful if you're the Owl Lady's apprentice. Panic hit instantly. Luz's mind went completely blank. Fire, ice, abomination mastery, that sounded amazing. What did she even have? So she did the only thing she could think to do. She overhyped. Oh, yeah, totally powerful, Luz said quickly. Super strong, like, crazy strong. You'll all see it at the exam. Ida's an amazing teacher. Right on cue, Luz. Ida reappeared, carrying a basket overflowing with snowballs. I shall now teach you how to identify different types of snow, by taste. She grabbed one and shoved it straight into Luz's face. Luz sputtered. Amira stared. Is this some kind of special magic? Amity coughed politely. I don't think the Owl Lady intends to show us her more powerful spells. She turned and began walking away. Brain freeze, Ida yelled, mouth full of snow. Brain freeze. Good luck with your training, Amira called, dragging Edric away after smacking a snow clump out of his hand. Ah, Edric muttered, waving as he went. Luz waved back weakly, then turned, irritation bubbling up. Why can't you take this seriously, she snapped. Ida froze. When she turned back, her expression wasn't joking anymore, just disappointed, with a hint of irritation beneath it. I was serious. She crossed her arms. Go, taste the snow without my guidance, see where it takes you. Luz's anger faltered, her shoulders sagged, gaze dropping to the ground. Ida sighed, her expression softening. She lifted a hand, conjuring a small orb of fire, warm, controlled, then smoothly shifted it into a golden ball of light that glowed gently before fading away. You'll cast magic like that one day, Ida said quietly. But it'll be your own magic, you just have to trust me. Luz nodded, I do. Ida smirked. And as Luz settled back into the snow, she realized, maybe she'd overreacted. Ida's methods were weird, sure, but they'd worked so far. After all, she was the most powerful witch on the Boiling Isles. Naruto landed on the branch in fox form, claws biting into the bark as a thin sheet of snow slid loose beneath him. It whispered down into the clearing below. He froze, nothing stirred. Slowly, he leaned forward, and this time, the clearing wasn't empty. The slither beast lay half buried in the snow, curled against the base of a massive tree, its breath deep and rhythmic. Each exhale puffed white into the cold air, steady enough that the ground around it seemed to rise and fall. Fast asleep. Naruto's ears flattened as he took it in. It was huge, easily half the size of the owl house. Thick white fur coated its entire body, clean and unmarked despite living out here on instinct alone. The most striking part of it wasn't its size, though. It was the mouth. There was no head in any normal sense. The maw was the head, or maybe the head never existed at all. A massive, rounded mouth dominated the creature's upper body, shrinking only slightly as it tapered into a thick torso. Rows of razor-sharp teeth lined the inside, sharper than Naruto's, overlapping in a way that made it hard to tell where one ended and the next began. No visible eyes, none he could see beneath the fur. From the torso, two powerful arms extended, ending in claws so large Naruto's entire fox body could have curled up in one. Below that, the beast narrowed again, legs built for strength rather than speed, dug into the snow like anchors. This thing was exactly why Slither Beast hair was so hard to get. Naruto shifted mid-branch, fur rippling as he dropped into his human form, landing silently on the bark. The cold didn't seem to bother him, hoodie still up, breath controlled as he focused. Quick, quiet, one strand. That was all he needed. He dropped from the tree. The snow cushioned his landing, swallowing the sound completely. Naruto stayed low, moving inch by inch, timing each step to the rise and fall of the beast's breathing. Inhale, step, exhale, pause. Closer. The fur was even thicker up close, clean, dense, almost irritatingly perfect. He crouched beneath the curve of its body, close enough now that he could feel the heat radiating through the snow. For a split second, a stupid thought crossed his mind. Honestly unfair. He reached out. Just one more inch, the beast grumbled. Naruto froze. Slowly, he lifted his gaze. The maw was suddenly right there. Too close. Its breath blasted over him in a hot rush, fogging the air as the creature lifted itself with terrifying speed. Snow exploded outward as it shifted, massive claws digging into the ground. The teeth parted slightly, a low, vibrating growl rolling out from deep inside its chest. Awake. Naruto's breath showed white in the cold as he stared up at it, hands still half extended. Of course. He straightened just a little, already calculating escape routes, muscles coiled and ready. Yeah, he muttered under his breath, lips twitching despite himself. That tracks. Why was his luck always this bad? Luz groaned as she dropped a pile of twigs and rocks onto the snow beside the old ruins where she and Ida had set up camp. Almost an hour since they'd arrived, an hour since Ida's training had started. And honestly, it didn't feel like training, it felt like stuff. Random stuff, like someone had shaken a bag of nonsense and dumped it out in front of her. Nothing clicked, nothing stuck. Okay, Luz said, raising her voice just enough to get Ida's attention. I've identified the smells of 3 different rocks, sorted all the twigs from big to small, and I found your glove. She paused, then lifted something else. And your hand. She tugged the glove off, revealing Ida's detached hand in full. Ida laughed, completely unfazed, and took it back. I was wondering where that went. She popped it back into place like nothing was wrong. Luz barely noticed, her attention drifted downhill, toward another clearing. Amity's camp. Amity was mid-duel with Edric and Amira, snow swirling around them as she redirected it with sharp, controlled movements. A well-aimed snowball smacked Edric square in the chest. Luz smiled despite herself. The twins waved up at her, Amira drew a spell circle, and the ground swallowed Amity halfway, dumping her into the snow as they laughed. Luz chuckled. Ida noticed. Hey, Ida said, softer. I know my lessons seem weird, but this is what wild magic is all about. Making a connection with nature. The earliest witches understood that. Human witches need to understand it too. She tilted her head. You want to learn a second spell? Luz looked back at her. Paused. Then smiled, bright and hopeful, with all my heart. Then you have to learn from the island. Ida guided her toward a rock at the edge of the ruins and nudged her down. Sit, look. Luz Saturday, from there, she could see almost all of the boiling isles. The island stretched out like a massive skeleton beneath the sun, the horned skull in the distance, ribs rising like mountains. The knee beneath them dusted in snow. Demons flew through the air below. Bones and life and magic all tangled together. It was beautiful. Exactly like the first time she'd seen it. Think about what the island's trying to tell you, Ida said, then wandered off, leaving Luz alone on the rock. For a moment, Luz thought Ida was right. Then the doubt crept in. So far, she'd learned scavenging tricks, survival stuff, which odds and ends. Useful, sure, but no real spells. Just the light glyph, variations of it, yeah, but still one spell. If she kept learning like this, was she really going to be any different from the baby class? She was already behind Gus, behind Willow. Way behind Amity. Listen to the island. Luz frowned. What if she needed to listen to herself? That's what had worked before. Naruto had helped her push the light glyph further, told her again and again how little they actually knew about glyphs. That there had to be more. So, why not try? She stood. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she started drawing. The glyph stretched taller than her, familiar lines warped and overwritten with new shapes, flame-like curves, sharp ice angles, bits of symbol logic she half remembered, half invented. It didn't look clean. It didn't look right. But wild magic wasn't about neat, was it? She stepped back, heart pounding. Hold it. Luz turned. Ida stood there, staring at the glyph, expression sharp. What are you doing with that? The frustration Luz had been swallowing finally boiled over. I'm doing magic. What would you have me do? Eat more snow, lick another rock? Ida paused. Okay, my methods are unique. But so is your magic. Connecting to the island can help. It hasn't, Luz shot back. So why are you so against this? You're all about wild magic, but you won't even let me try. Ida sighed, rubbing her temple. Trying things out is great, necessary, even. But these glyphs, she gestured at the snow, aren't like anything anyone's ever seen. Small changes worked because you were still learning the rules. This? She shook her head. This isn't helping you. It already has, Luz said firmly. And she stepped onto the glyph. It lit, but wrong. Not the steady glow she was used to. It surged, flickered. Then a golden orb rose from the snow, smaller than the glyph but pulsing hard. Luz crossed her arms, smirking at Ida. Then the orb swelled. Lose! Ida shouted, cover your eyes. Too late. The light detonated. A white flash ripped across the knee, the ground buckling as Luz cried out, hands flying to her head. Snow blasted outward in a wave. Deep in the forest, Naruto barely dodged as a claw tore through the space where he'd been. He twisted, fire flaring from a seal, sending a wave of flames crashing into the slither beast. It didn't even slow, it burst through the fire, roaring. Of course, Naruto muttered, dodging another swipe. 3 fireballs slammed into its side mid-air, it barely reacted. Then the ground shook. The beast froze, growled, and bolted. Naruto skidded to a stop, staring after it. What? That hadn't been fear, it had been attention. He chased. Trees blurred past until the forest broke, and Naruto skidded into a clearing he recognized too late. Ruins. Ida was in the slither beast's grip. So were Edric and Amira. Amity stood in front of Luz, who was barely conscious. Naruto snarled. He didn't know how this happened. Didn't care. He leapt, landing hard beside Luz and Amity, arms half-shifted, fur bristling. The slither beast struck. Naruto was slammed aside mid-air, skidding through snow as Amity shouted his name. And then the beast ran. With Ida, with the twins. Naruto pushed himself up, teeth clenched. This just got worse, he growled. Amity was already there when Naruto pushed himself up, brushing snow from his sleeve. She grabbed his arm without hesitation, steadying him as he shifted fully back into his human form. You okay? She asked, eyes still flicking toward the tree line. Yeah, Naruto muttered, then turned. Luz was swaying. Both of them moved at once. Naruto caught her before she could tip over. Amity supporting her other side as they eased her upright. What were you all doing out here? Naruto asked, sharper than he meant to. It doesn't matter, Luz said quickly. What matters is Ida, Edric and Amira. We have to go after them. Naruto blinked. She still hadn't opened her eyes. Luz, he said, gently this time. He lifted her chin just enough to look closer. Open your eyes. She hesitated, then did. Her pupils didn't track. Naruto waved his hand in front of her face. Nothing. You can't see, he said quietly. Not really, Luz admitted, forcing a smile that didn't land. But I can still help. Naruto's jaw tightened. Fire and seals, the slither beast running, the flash, the timing, this was on him. If he hadn't gone after the slither beast, if he'd known they were here. Luz straightened suddenly, pulling herself out of his grip. Come on, we have to hurry. No, Amity said instantly. Luz turned toward her voice, what? You can't see, Amity said, firmer now. That thing almost killed us when we could, you'll get hurt. I don't care, you're staying, she said. That's not a suggestion. Naruto nodded, she's right, you stay here. Luz opened her mouth to argue again, but neither of them let her. We'll bring them back, Naruto said. I promise. And then they were gone, boots crunching into the snow, footsteps fading fast. Luz took a step after them. Missed. She went down hard, snow filling her gloves, the cold biting through her clothes. She didn't get back up right away. She didn't need to see to know how badly she'd messed up. She'd pushed too far. Got so obsessed with training that she'd stopped listening, blinded herself. Drew attention to the ruins, and when Ida had tried to protect her, Ida had been taken. The twins too. Amity had fought. She knew they had. And Edric and Amira wouldn't have gone down without trying to protect her. All because she hadn't stopped, all because she hadn't listened. She squeezed her eyes shut, and something cold and wet touched her face. She flinched, snow. A few flakes melted against her lashes, the cold shocking enough that she gasped and blinked, and froze. She could see. Not clearly at first, just light and shadow, then shapes, then the sky. Her vision settled, and her breath caught. Above her, traced faintly across the stars, was a light glyph. Not drawn, not carved, there. Lines of violet and blue light, subtle but unmistakable, as if the sky itself had always held it and she'd only just learned how to look. Luz slowly raised her hand, tracing the air beneath it. What? A snowflake landed on her glove. She frowned, lifting it closer to her face. The flake wasn't small, it was half the size of her palm, and etched into its crystalline pattern, a glyph. Her breath hitched. Another one. Like Naruto had said. She'd searched a library, notes, books. When the island itself had been speaking the whole time. The flake melted before she could react. Luz grabbed a fallen branch and held it out, catching another. This time she studied it. The pattern burned itself into her mind. She dropped to her knees and drew. A circle, like the light glyph, familiar, grounding. Inside it, a tall diamond split by a line, beneath it, a smaller diamond, separated by a low bar. A curved line arched across the upper center, touching the circle on both sides. She tapped it. The snow answered. Ice surged upward in a clean, solid pillar, clear and sharp and real. Luz stared. It wasn't wild, it wasn't chaotic. It was, right, a gift. Magic wasn't hidden, it was everywhere. She just needed to listen, like what Ida told her. Ida, Luz whispered. The guilt came rushing back just as fast. Naruto and Amity were strong, but Ida had been taken off guard. And the slither beast was something else entirely. She couldn't sit here, even if she got in the way. She was done waiting. Luz scrambled to her feet, eyes locking onto the tracks cutting through the snow. Naruto's, Amity's. I'm coming, she said, and ran. The slither beast slammed Ida, Amira, and Edric back against the cavern wall with one massive hand. The impact rattled the den, snow dusting down from the ceiling as the creature reared back and spat a thick glob of purple goop. It splashed across their chests and the stone behind them, hardening instantly, pinning them in place by their torsos before the beast turned and bounded deeper into its cave. The den was enormous, cold as the knee outside, snow somehow packed into the stone floor despite being underground. Old bones jutted from the walls. Claw marks scored the ice. Amira strained against the hardened goop and forced a smile. Don't worry, we'll be fine. Right on cue, several skeletons dropped from the ceiling, half melted into similar purple residue, dangling lifelessly around them. Edric swallowed. No, we're gonna die. A voice cut through the gloom. No, you're not. Luz burst from behind a rock formation, skidding slightly on the snow as she landed in the open. Ida's head snapped up. Kid, get outta here. I'll just sneak away when the thing starts eating the twins. Wait, what? Amira yelped. Edric let out an offended gasp. Excuse you? Luz didn't slow. Don't worry, Ida, I get it now. I was so obsessed with learning my second spell. I didn't listen to you, but now I am gonna save you. She darted away again before anyone could stop her. Ida sighed, slumping slightly against the wall. Well, at least I got to see her misplaced confidence one last time. Naruto and Amity crouched behind a jagged outcrop deeper in the cave, peering toward the slither beast's massive shape as it paced near the center of the den. Snow crunched under its claws with every step. Naruto scowled. Frontal attacks the cleanest, he muttered. But even together, we won't put it down. Amity glanced at the trapped figures, jaw tightening. Then I free them while you keep it busy. Before Naruto could respond, another voice slid in behind them. Or, you both keep it busy, and I do my thing. They spun. Luz stood there, breath fogging in the cold, eyes focused now, clear. Naruto blinked. How did you? My vision cleared up enough, she said quickly. And I learned a new glyph. That's not important. What is important is I have a plan. Naruto hesitated, then glanced at Amity. Sudden, but he could see it in Luz's posture. She wasn't guessing anymore. Amity studied her for a beat, then nodded. Okay, tell us. Luz leaned in and whispered. Naruto exhaled slowly when she finished. Yeah, that'll work. The slither beast roared as Naruto landed in front of it, now in a larger fox form, nearly half its size, 9 tails fanning wide. Amity clung to his back as he hit the ground on all fours, snow exploding outward. Amity didn't waste time. A spell circle flared in front of her chest, abomination goop launching forward in heavy bolts. The slither beast swatted them aside with a massive arm and charged. Naruto met it head-on. He lunged, claws slashing as Amity cut her spell mid-flight, snapping the goop into dozens of needle-thin shards and sending them back in a precise swarm. The beast twisted away from Naruto's strike, but the needles tore into its side as he landed. It roared and slammed a fist down. Naruto slid under it, sprinted out of a body slam, then rounded as the creature turned. His tail stretched, lengthening unnaturally, whipping forward in a violent storm of strikes. Every hit landed. Every pull, every slash, every whip. The slither beast staggered, but did not fall. It planted its feet and unleashed a roar so powerful the air itself seemed to rupture. The shockwave blasted Naruto's tails aside and sent snow cascading from the ceiling. Then it charged. Amity drew another spell, small, simple. A dense clump of abomination floated in front of Naruto. Shape it. Naruto's ears twitched. His claw shifted, fingers forming as he grabbed the goop and pulled it into the seal along his arm. Instinct guided him as he compressed it, twisted it, spun it inward, violent motion contained under absolute control. The orb screamed with pressure. Tailed beast bomb, something in his head whispered. He didn't know why the name fit, it just did. Naruto charged. The slither beast met him head-on. The orb connected, and time seemed to halt. The beast froze mid-lunge as gravity gave up on it, the orb spinning violently, dragging the creature into its rotation. Naruto pushed through, muscles burning, and the slither beast was hurled across the cave, smashing into the far wall and collapsing into the snow. Naruto panted. For a second, he thought, the beast moved. It rose again, faster this time, frothing, snarling, fury pouring off it in waves. Great, Naruto muttered. I just made it matter. It lunged, and stepped onto the glyph. Blue light flared beneath its feet. A pillar of ice erupted from the snow, massive and brutal, slamming the slither beast straight into the ceiling and pinning it there in a frozen cage. Silence. Naruto dropped back into human form as Amity slid off his back, both of them exhaling in relief. Luz stepped out from her hiding place, grinning. Told you it'd work. Still mad we were the distraction, Naruto said dryly. Amity huffed. Same. Hey, Ida's voice echoed. While you're congratulating yourselves, some of us are still wall decor. Naruto shifted into fox form again and flicked a tail, snapping the goop free and lowering Ida and the twins gently to the ground. They barely had time to breathe before the ice cracked. The slither beast thrashed, shattered the pillar, and lunged. Ida smirked. Oh no you don't. A massive spell circle flared into existence. You're not catching me off guard twice. Sleep spell. The beast barreled through the circle and collapsed instantly, hitting the snow with a thunderous thump, snoring. Edric and Amira stared in awe as Ida blew imaginary smoke from her fingers. Luz rushed forward. Now that's my mentor. Did you see, I learned my second spell. I saw, Ida said, ruffling her hair. Nice work kiddo. Amira smiled softly. You were brave out there, sis. Edric nodded, ruffling Amity's hair. Yeah, kiddo. Hey, stop that, Amity snapped, fixing her hair before turning to Luz, composure settling back in place. So, I guess we'll be in the same class. Luz beamed. Azure book club? Amity blushed, as long as it's secret. It's not a secret, Edric laughed. We're telling everyone, Amira added. Ida sneezed loudly as Naruto hopped onto her shoulder. Alright, your adorable banter is making me sick. Let's go home. On it teach, Luz said. Wait, Ida added. Naruto, when did you? He didn't answer. Luz activated another ice glyph, sending them shooting into the air as they cheered. Naruto yawned mid-flight and pulled a small clump of white fur from his pocket. He'd snagged it. They were safe, Luz had her spell. Amity was smiling. Now all that was left was basilisk blood. And that, he knew, wouldn't be nearly as easy. Time skip. Naruto sat on Luz's head as Ida flew them above the forest surrounding Hexside, legs folded, tail lazily flicking behind him. Below them, the trees burned in shades of orange and gold, the morning sun catching on the leaves and turning the canopy into a sea of embers. Luz had passed her entrance exam, that fact did very little to calm her nerves. Naruto, meanwhile, was only half aware of the wind rushing past his ears. Even as he dozed, his thoughts circled the same problem they had for days now. Chakra ink. More specifically, the final component he needed to recreate it properly for his new seal. Basilisk blood. Ever since he'd gotten his hands on a clump of slither beast hair a few days ago, he'd been digging through every scrap of information he could find on magic eaters, basilisks, slither beasts, anything that fed instead of cast. They were supposed to be extinct. Naruto knew better. Extinction usually meant hiding, especially when shapeshifters were involved. Few in number, careful, patient. And there had been signs. Multiple magic schools across the Boiling Isles had been infiltrated. Students left drained, their magic completely gone, not injured. Not cursed, consumed. A glutton was on the move. That didn't mean he could track it yet, not properly. His best option was to wait until Hexside ended up on the menu, and there was no telling when that would happen. Unless the basilisk made a mistake. Ida brought her staff down onto the stone walkway leading up to Hexside, letting Naruto and Luz hop off with a grin. Tall trees lined the path toward the school, their branches arching overhead as students, new and old, filtered in from every direction. Luz now wore a Hexside uniform like the others, though hers was still gray and white, unassigned to any track. A satchel full of glyphs bounced nervously at her side. Last chance to walk away. Ida called out, smirking. From here on out, it's all school drama and trauma. She laughed at her own joke. Luz did not. She immediately started muttering under her breath, half-formed hypotheticals spilling out one after another. Naruto flicked his tail, wrapping it loosely around her shoulders in a half-hearted attempt at comfort. It didn't help much. Ida glanced at him, you sure you want to stay, thought this was a Luz-only nightmare. Naruto nodded slightly. Ida's grin widened, what, you can't leave your crush alone for one day? Naruto's ears twitched, the faint heat under his fur was thankfully hidden, but Luz stopped muttering instantly. I'm not here for Luz. Naruto said flatly. Luz gasped, clutching her chest, wow, betrayal. Not this time, he corrected. I'm starting as Hexside's demonic guard today, part-time. Ida raised an eyebrow, since when did you plan this? Since the first time you asked where I disappeared to every other day. Ida blinked, then snorted, that was a while ago. Naruto shrugged and looked back at Luz, you ready to go, or am I gonna suffer more questions? Luz hesitated, then sighed, I don't think I'm ready. Last time I started at a new school, I totally ruined my first impression. What if I do that again? Naruto lowered his head, studying her. Overthinking, as usual. You probably will, he said bluntly. Luz froze. But, he continued, you're good at changing people's minds, first impressions don't stick when you don't let them. Luz blinked. Ida nodded, he's right, who cares about first impressions? Then her grin sharpened, and if it does matter, knock out the first guy you see. Builds respect. I am not doing that, Luz said, laughing despite herself. Ida shrugged. Suit yourself, just don't try being a goody two-shoes. I like my apprentice the way she is. Luz exhaled, shoulders loosening. I won't let this place stop me from being me. That's my girl, Ida said. Show what's what. She hopped back onto her staff. I'll pick you up later, bye. Ida took off. Laughter trailing behind her. Naruto chuckled quietly as Luz watched her go, visibly steadier now. After a short pause, they headed toward the school. Hexside buzzed with the energy of a new semester. Students rushed past, spells flaring in small bursts. Banners fluttered near the roof, each track symbol waving like a challenge. This is a lot, Luz murmured. Before Naruto could respond, Amity passed them. She didn't stop, but she lifted a hand. Hey Luz, Naruto. Hey, Luz waved brightly. Amity smiled back, soft, polite, then continued on, posture straight, already moving with purpose. Luz beamed. Naruto lifted a hand in a half wave. A moment later, Luz was already climbing the stairs. Luz, Willow and Gus called, waving from the bottom of the main staircase. Hello fellow Hexolios, Luz grinned. You did it, Gus said, conjuring a spell circle and tossing it into the air. Blue letters formed, better luck next time. Willow shot him a glare. Sorry, Gus said quickly. Covering all my bases. Willow turned back to Luz, smiling. See those banners, she gestured upward. Those are the heads of the 9 main covens, each one excelled at a school like Glandus, Saint Epiderm, or Hexside. Ready to enter the hallowed halls? Naruto leapt down from Luz's head onto the steps. Glandus, Saint Epiderm. The last 2 schools hit. If he was right, Hexside wasn't far behind. Guess I'll find out, Luz said. See you inside. She ran ahead. See you later, Gus called, throwing another spell into the air. Goodbye forever. Willow glared again. Gus coughed. I'll get rid of those. Naruto hopped onto Gus's shoulder. Yo. Gus blinked. Hey, aren't you gonna follow Luz? Nah, Naruto said. Got other things to do. Willow raised an eyebrow. Like what? I'm Hexside's new head of security. Silence. They didn't look confused, they looked concerned. What? Naruto asked. Gus tilted his head. I mean, he said lightly, you are kinda lazy, we're allowed to worry. Naruto stared at him, then sighed. Anyway, I've got some questions about the school. Willow smiled again. Ask away, we're happy to help. Naruto shifted his weight on Gus's shoulder, tail flicking once as he looked out over the flow of students entering Hexside. So, he started casually, what should I expect around here? Willow tilted her head. What do you mean? Trouble, Naruto clarified. The kind that actually gets people hurt. Not just school drama. Gus perked up a little. Oh well, there's usually some chaos at the start of the semester. New students mixing tracks by accident, potion explosions, illusion mishaps, flying abominations, Willow added quickly. Naruto blinked. Flying? Briefly, Willow said, and not on purpose. Good to know, Naruto muttered. Gus continued, warming to the topic. Also, upperclassmen pulling stunts. Mostly harmless, but sometimes someone gets hexed the wrong way or stuck as a bug for a few hours. Naruto's ears twitched. Anyone I should keep an eye on? Willow thought for a moment. There are a few repeat troublemakers, but Hexside's gotten better about safety. Principal Bump takes that stuff seriously. Naruto nodded. Patterns matter more than people anyway. Willow studied him for a second. You're taking this really seriously. He shrugged. If something goes wrong, it usually happens fast. Gus frowned slightly. Is that normal for demon guards? Naruto smirked. Not usually. He glanced back toward the entrance, watching students disappear inside. Anything else? Places accidents happen more often? Well, Willow said slowly, the old detention wing has issues. And the potion labs if students start experimenting. Oh, and the back hallways near the illusion rooms. People like to sneak around there. Naruto filed all of it away. Okay, he said. Last question. Willow and Gus both leaned in a little. If something was off, Naruto said evenly, who here would notice first? Gus answered immediately. Amity. The word left his mouth before he could stop it. Willow's shoulders stiffened, and her expression dimmed just a bit. Naruto caught it instantly. Oh, Gus said softly, realizing too late. Willow looked away. She is really observant, focused. Notices patterns other people miss. Naruto nodded slowly. Smart, powerful, detail-oriented, exactly the kind of person he'd want watching his blind spots. If Hexside was going to be hit, he couldn't guard everything alone. I could use her, he thought, if she's willing. But not without knowing for sure. I'll test her first, he decided, then I'll ask. He turned back to Willow. Sorry, he said simply. Didn't mean to bring that up. Willow blinked, surprised by the sincerity. It's fine, she said after a moment, forcing a small smile. Really? Gus clapped his hands together. Clearly eager to change the subject. So, since you're gonna be around Hexside now, Naruto hopped down from his shoulder. You wanna sit with us at lunch, Gus finished. You know, if you're not busy guarding the school from exploding. Naruto paused. Then he chuckled. Yeah, he said. Sure. Gus grinned. Awesome. Willow smiled too, more relaxed now. See you later then. Naruto gave them a short nod before slipping into the flow of students, vanishing into the shadows of Hexside. Amity Blight, he thought as he moved, let's see how sharp you really are. Naruto didn't bother hiding. Not really. He kept to the edges of the hallway as Amity moved ahead of him, footsteps measured. Back straight, uniform immaculate as always. The early morning corridor was mostly empty, classes in session, doors shut, the hum of magic muffled behind stone. She noticed him almost immediately. She just didn't say anything. Naruto followed at a distance that made it obvious to anyone paying attention. Which, apparently, was the point. He watched the way her shoulders stayed relaxed, the way she never once glanced back, never broke stride. 2 turns. A stairwell. Another stretch of hall. Finally, Amity slowed. She stopped just before an intersection, turned her head slightly, and spoke without looking at him. You know, she said calmly, if you're going to keep doing that, you could at least walk beside me. Naruto blinked, ears twitching. You let me follow you all this way, he asked, stepping out of the shadows. That's cold. She turned then, one eyebrow lifting just enough to be noticeable. Her expression was composed, polite, softened from what it used to be, but still carefully held. I didn't let you, Amity replied. You're not subtle. Naruto snorted and padded forward, fox paws clicking lightly against the stone as he fell into step next to her. Hey, I tried, he said. At least pretend it was difficult. A corner of her mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close, I considered it. They walked in silence for a moment, the space between them comfortable in a way that surprised him. Then Amity glanced sideways. So, she said, is there a reason Hexside's newest mystery guardian is trailing me through the halls? Naruto huffed. Word travels fast. It does when you make a point of being noticed. Fair. Naruto folded his hands behind his head as they walked. I'm starting my rounds, got some information. There's a chance the school could be targeted. Amity's steps didn't falter. Targeted by what? Magic Eater, Naruto said. Basilisk. She stopped this time. Slowly, she turned to face him fully, eyes sharp. Basilisks are extinct. That's what people say, Naruto replied easily. People are usually wrong. She studied him for a beat, then resumed walking. Even if that were true, she said, it still doesn't explain why you were watching me. Naruto shrugged, you notice things. Amity's gaze flicked forward, that's not an answer. It's the beginning of one. He glanced at her. If something goes wrong, I need to know who'll see it first. She let out a quiet breath, so I'm, what, a lookout? Useful, Naruto said without thinking. The word landed harder than he meant it to. Amity slowed, just slightly, not enough to stop walking, just enough to mark the moment. People usually only say that, she replied evenly, when they want something. Naruto winced internally. Then I'll ask next time, he said after a second. That made her look at him again. Not suspicious, not offended, curious. They continued down the hall, footsteps echoing softly. You've changed, Naruto added, almost offhand. Since the convention. Her shoulders tensed, barely, is that a problem? No, he said immediately, it's noticeable, in a good way. She considered that, most people don't. Naruto tilted his head, that's an understatement, once people decide what you are, they stop checking. Her grip on her books tightened, you sound like you're speaking from experience. He was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said. I got pretty good at being what people expected. She glanced at him again, and you stopped. Naruto shrugged, didn't work anymore. They reached the door to her classroom. Amity hesitated, hand hovering over the handle. If you need help, she said, not looking at him, you can just ask. Naruto smiled, small and genuine, good to know. She nodded once, then paused. There's an empty classroom on the 3rd floor, she added. No one uses it, empty most of the day. Naruto blinked, then grinned. He hopped lightly onto her shoulder, yawning. Lead the way then, but if there's a pop quiz, I'm blaming you. Amity rolled her eyes, but she didn't shake him off. Luz rested her chin in her palm and tried not to sigh. The black uniform with pale blue trim still felt wrong on her, too neat. Too intentional. Illusionist track colors. Prestigious, clean. She wasn't. The illusion on her desk shimmered weakly, then collapsed into smoke for the 3rd time. Luz slumped. She wasn't just new at this, she was bad. Illusions demanded restraint, precision, subtlety. Luz's instincts leaned toward motion, experimentation, mixing things together, none of that belonged here. And to top it off, Gus. Normally, Gus Porter was loud, excited, endlessly curious. Hex-side Gus, however, had been assigned as her guide, and Hex-side Gus was all posture and policy. No altering assigned spell matrices. No cross-track applications. And please stop touching the illusion before it stabilizes. She barely registered the rest of the lecture as her attention drifted toward the tall windows. Outside, magic moved. Willow stood locked in a duel with a fortune-teller student, vines and snapping flowers colliding with pale spirits pouring from a crystal ball. Neither gained ground. The clash held, balanced and intense. Luz leaned forward despite herself. That felt like magic. Her gaze dropped back to her desk, to the ruined illusion, and the thought hit sharp and sudden. Why am I here? She hadn't wanted one track. She'd said that. But Principal Bump had smiled thinly and placed her here anyway. What are you looking at? Luz yelped and spun around. Gus, when did you? The classroom was empty. Did class end? Yes, Gus said, adjusting his uniform. 3 minutes ago. We still have required between-class obligations. He rattled them off: sigil recalibration, locker rune checks, attendance crystal syncing. Luz stared. Every day? They're rules, Gus said brightly. That seems kinda silly. Gus paused, then straightened. Rules exist for a reason. She tilted her head. You're different here. He blinked. Different? Outside school, you're fun, I didn't think you were a rules-first kind of witch. Gus smiled, smaller this time. Outside, I can relax. Here, Heckside's rules are important, they protect students. There was something more there. But he turned before she could ask. Come on, he said. We're already behind. Luz followed, glancing once more out the window toward the courtyard, toward magic that wasn't boxed in, before stepping into the orderly halls. Her first day was already telling her one thing. She didn't fit neatly. The tasks were worse than Gus had made them sound. Luz learned this quickly. First came trash duty. Every hallway can had to be emptied and incinerated, despite the fact that the trash cans were alive, snarling little things with teeth and glowing throats that happily belched fire whenever something hit the bottom. They did the job themselves. Then why, Luz started. Rules, Gus said, already moving on. Next was light maintenance. Every single glowing orb in the building had to be checked to make sure it hadn't lost power. Luz poked one. It hummed contentedly and floated in a lazy circle. These are self-sustaining, she said. They're literally magic. Yes, Gus agreed. But they still need to be checked. By the third pointless errand, a pattern emerged. Some rules mattered, she'd seen them: protective sigils, safety barriers, emergency runes. Those made sense, but these? These felt like rules that existed because no one had bothered to ask why they were there in the first place. Eventually, Luz lagged behind, leaning against a tall shelf while Gus hurried ahead to finish the checklist. Just a second, she muttered, exhaling. I need a break before my brain melts. That was when she noticed the crystal balls. Dozens of them sat humming softly on the shelf beside her, their surfaces cloudy with half-seen shapes. Luz tilted her head. B, what's the worst that could happen? She picked one up. B, okay, spooky orb, she whispered. Show me something cool. The crystal flared. Luz froze. A pale, translucent soul drifted out, hovering in front of her face. It stared at her with hollow eyes, then leaned closer. You are about to be in trouble, it intoned. Oh, Luz breathed. Neat. A sharp ahem echoed behind her. Luz turned slowly. Principal Bump stood in the aisle. Arms crossed, eyes blazing. She said. Hi. Mixing magic tracks, Bump growled, is strictly forbidden. Before she could explain, he seized her wrist. Detention. Wait, hold on, I can fix this, Luz yelped. She tossed down a smoke bomb illusion she'd meant to finish earlier. It fizzled. Barely smoked. Okay, bad start. She scrambled for a glyph. Bump plucked it from her hand without even looking. Hey. Fine, plan C. Luz slapped a light glyph against the floor. Flash. Bump didn't blink. He adjusted his devil mask, unimpressed, and tightened his grip. Detention, he repeated flatly. Luz groaned as he dragged her down the hall. So, she muttered. Mostly to herself, first day record? Somewhere ahead, Gus stopped short. Luz? Yeah. This was definitely going on her permanent record. The detention gate slammed shut behind them with a sound like a coffin ceiling. Luz flinched at the echo, then turned, eyes darting across the dim chamber. So, she muttered, forcing a weak laugh, how different can detention really be? She stopped. The floor dropped away only a few steps ahead, a massive pit yawning open like a wound in the stone. Cold air rolled up from it, damp and wrong, carrying a low, wet rustling sound that made Luz's stomach sink. The walls were carved with old runes, half eroded, glowing faintly blue like they hadn't been maintained in years. Chains hung loose along the edges, some broken, some very much not. Oh, Luz said quietly. That different. Something moved. Then several somethings. Worm-like shapes hauled themselves up from the pit, slick bodies folding and unfolding as they climbed. Their skin was pale and rubbery, stretched too tight over boneless forms. And their faces, too human, too aware. Their eyes flashed blue. Then red. They noticed her. Luz sucked in a sharp breath and backed up instinctively, bumping straight into Gus. "Gus," she whispered urgently. "We need to go, now." The creatures surged forward all at once. Luz bolted. She grabbed Gus's wrist and ran, boots slapping against stone as the worms poured after them. Bodies slithering unnaturally fast. One snapped at her heel, teeth clacking inches from her shoe. She yelped and swerved, heart hammering. "Why are there worms?" she shouted, with faces. "Detention security," Gus yelled back, breathless. They're meant to deter escape. They're doing a great job." They skidded around a corner, nearly colliding with a dead end. Luz spun, eyes wild, searching for anything, to use. "Okay," she panted. "Okay, think." She slapped her hands against the wall, already tracing a glyph from memory, Luz, wait. She hesitated just long enough for Gus to grab her sleeve and yank her forward again as a worm slammed into the wall where she'd been standing. They ran again. Down another corridor. Then another. The tunnels twisted unnaturally, looping back on themselves, like the place was designed to disorient. Luz could feel the rules of it pressing in, invisible but heavy. "Gus," she shouted over the sound of pursuit. "You know this place, right? You and Willow studied everything." I know the layout," he said, panic creeping into his voice. We're not supposed to be down here like this." "We are very much down here." The worms surged closer. One brushed her leg. She stumbled, barely catching herself before hitting the ground. That was when she snapped. She skidded to a stop and turned, planting herself in front of Gus. Arms spread. "Nope, stop, we are not dying in detention." "Luz, move," Gus cried, tugging at her arm. "The rules say." "I don't care what the rules say," she shouted back. "These things are going to eat us." The worms slowed. Not stopping. But hesitating. Their eyes flickered. Gus froze. "They're not going for us," he said suddenly. "What?" "They're heading for," he turned, pointing past her. "The pit." Luz glanced back. Sure enough, the worms veered, bodies curving away from them as they surged toward the hole instead. "Why?" she asked cautiously. Gus swallowed, "Because they can't go to the bottom." Luz stared at him. "The what?" "It's storage," he said. Voice shaking but certain. "They're trained not to enter it, the bottom level is restricted." Luz followed his gaze to the yawning darkness. "That's worse," she said flatly. The worms poured past them now, diving back into the pit, their bodies vanishing into the dark with wet, echoing sounds. Silence followed. Luz stood there, chest heaving. "Okay," she said. "New rule, we don't talk about the worm pit ever again." Gus didn't laugh. He was staring at the hole. "Gus," she said, softer. "This is where they put them," he said. "Put who?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward and jumped. Luz screamed his name and dove after him. They fell. Wind rushed past them as the pit swallowed them whole. Luz flailed, heart in her throat, a glowing spell circle snapped into place beneath them. They hit it and bounced, hard, tumbling onto solid ground. Luz groaned and rolled onto her side. "I officially hate this school," she paused. "I don't mean that, but I severely dislike detention." She pushed herself up, and froze. The bottom level stretched out before them in branching corridors. Along the walls were rows of large, translucent pods, glowing faint blue. Inside them, students, witches. Asleep, suspended. Their faces were blank, too calm. "Gus," Luz whispered, "why are there kids in eggs?" He hugged himself. Eyes downcast. This is detention, he said quietly. Her stomach dropped. No, she said. No, detention is sitting in a room and thinking about what you did. This is, correction, Gus said, voice tight. Reformation. She turned on him. That's not a thing. It is here, he said. Rule breakers, troublemakers, students who don't fit. He gestured helplessly at the pods. There, corrected. Luz's hands curled into fists. For how long? Depends on the offense. Her voice shook. Mixing magic? Gus nodded. Learning outside your track? Another nod. Pulling a prank? If it's bad enough. Luz stared at the pods. They're treating people like broken tools. She said hoarsely. Just shutting them off. It's what the rules say, Gus replied automatically. She rounded on him, why do you keep saying that? He flinched. Because the rules kept me safe. Her anger stalled. He took a shaky breath. When I got here this year, I'm 13, he said. Everyone else was older, stronger, louder, when I first arrived. He swallowed. They didn't take me seriously, some of them were cruel. But the rules, he hesitated. The rules punished bullies, immediately, no arguing, no exceptions. He looked up at her, eyes glassy. So I followed all of them, even the dumb ones. Because if the rules worked for me, they must be right. Luz's expression softened. She looked back at the pods. They're not, she said gently, not all of them. He followed her gaze. They're not protecting anyone down here, she continued, they're hiding problems instead of fixing them. She stepped closer to the pods, resting a hand against the cool surface. Rules are supposed to help people, she said. Not erase them. Gus stood very still. Then, quietly, what do we do? Luz exhaled. A slow smile crept onto her face. Well, she said, picking up a loose shard of stone, Bump took my glyphs. She knelt and began to draw. But he didn't take my memory. The detention gates stood wide open. Students clustered together in the hallway. Some rubbing their eyes, others gripping their arms like they weren't convinced this was real. Blue residue from the pods still clung to their clothes. The worm pit below gurgled angrily, contained now by a hastily formed barrier spell. Principal Bump appeared in a flash of light, feet striking the floor with a sharp crack. What, he barked, is the meaning of, he stopped. His gaze swept over the scene, the students, the shattered pod casings, the open pit, Luz standing in front of Gus like she was bracing for impact. His eye twitched. You were not supposed to be seen, he said slowly. The Emperor's Coven consultant arrives today. One of the freed students spoke up. Voice hoarse, sir, we were asleep. Another added, quieter, I thought I'd been expelled. Murmurs rippled through the group. Bump tightened his grip on his staff. You are all in detention, he snapped. You broke the rules. Luz clenched her fists. She took a step forward. With all due respect, Principal Bump, she said, voice shaking but loud, those rules are messed up. Bump turned his glare on her instantly. You, no, Gus said suddenly. Everyone froze. Gus swallowed, then straightened, standing beside Luz. No, he repeated, firmer. They didn't break the rules. Bump stared at him, young man, not any that are important, Gus said. They shouldn't have ended up down there because of that. A heavy silence fell. Bump hesitated, explain. Gus took a breath, mixing magic, learning outside assigned tracks. Being, inconvenient. His voice wavered. None of that deserves to erase someone. Bump looked toward the pit. Erase, he echoed. Luz jumped in, rules are supposed to protect students, she said. Not hide them when they don't fit. Bump's shoulders sagged slightly, Hexside is built on order. And order isn't the same as control, Gus said. That made Bump flinch. He turned fully toward the pit now, staring down into it like he was seeing it for the first time. This was meant to be temporary, he muttered. A corrective measure. How long was I down there? One student asked quietly. Bump didn't answer, the silence stretched. Finally, he exhaled. Detention, he said slowly, will be suspended. Gasps rippled through the hall. And the track system, Luz asked, hopeful but cautious. Bump eyed her. You are an anomaly, he said. And anomalies expose flaws. He raised his staff, tapping it once against the floor. Hexside will begin restructuring. A soft glow rippled over Luz's uniform. The blue vanished, yellow, green, purple and red colors blooming on each of her limbs across her sleeves and leggings. Luz stared down at herself. Did I just unlock multiclassing? She whispered. Gus laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound, before clapping a hand over his mouth. Bump sighed, do not let this go to your head. Luz beamed anyway. She turned to Gus, we did it. Gus stared at the students dispersing, free. Yeah, he said quietly. We did. Naruto was curled on the teacher's desk in his small fox form, orange fur puffed slightly as he slept, or pretended to. His tail was wrapped around his body, ears angled just enough to catch everything. He looked like he belonged there, like he'd settled in without asking, which, Amity noted, was very on brand. She leaned against the desk opposite him, arms folded. So, she said, breaking the silence, your theory. One ear twitched. You think Hexside is being hunted by a basilisk, she continued, measured. A creature that's been extinct for centuries. That's a stretch. Naruto didn't open his eyes, schools don't drain themselves. That proves nothing. It proves something. He replied. Amity sighed, it proves coincidence. His tail flicked once, do you usually hate coincidence? She paused, lips thinning. I hate sloppy conclusions. Naruto cracked one eye open, looking at her through it. Is my credibility really that low now? This isn't about you, she said. This is a choppy theory at best. And all of it seems to circle back to, her gaze dipped briefly to the seals etched along his forelegs, those. He didn't bristle, didn't deflect. It's not only about the seals, he said quietly. Amity waited. Hexside being in danger affects my deal with Bump, Naruto continued. And it affects the safety of a few people I happen to be fond of. Her breath stuttered. Fond of, she echoed. He cracked the other eye open. You're one of them to let you know. That shut her up. Naruto stretched, then flowed out of his fox form mid-motion, landing lightly on the floor as a human. So, he said, hands slipping into his pockets. We figure out what angle the shapeshifter's taking. Angle? Disguise, goal, timing, he listed. What it gains by hiding, how long it waits, how strong it is now. Amity started pacing, if it's feeding slowly, it wouldn't want attention. And if it's not here already, it'd want easy access to the school, no questions, Naruto added. She froze. Principal Bump mentioned something earlier on the announcements. She said slowly. An inspector, Emperor's Coven, official visit. Naruto raised an eyebrow but stayed silent. They're offering aid, Amity continued. Donations, repairs, Hexside has debts, ones it can't ignore. Naruto's expression sharpened. The other schools that were drained, she went on, faster now, the days it happened never sat right with me. Reports of Coven assistance always came in around the same time. She turned to him. I thought it was strange. It was cover, Naruto said. Amity nodded, no one would question an inspector. They'd roll out a carpet, he replied. The room fell quiet again, but this time it felt settled. For something extinct. Amity said, this is a lot to gamble on. Naruto smiled faintly, rather gamble and check than wait for us to be sitting ducks. She huffed, fine. He turned toward the door, then we meet it head-on. Amity followed, gaze lingering on him just a second longer than necessary, thoughtful, recalibrating. They stood at the path leading up to Hexside, sun reaching its peak. Waiting. Naruto stayed in human form, sharp red eyes narrowed, fox ears pricked high atop his blonde hair, twitching at every shift of air. His posture was loose on the surface, hands at his sides, but there was a coiled tension beneath it, the kind that came from instinct rather than thought. Amity stood beside him, mirroring that readiness in her own way. Even in her uniform, she was prepared. Her shoulders were squared, wand hand relaxed but ready, her expression calm in the way that came from knowing the danger rather than underestimating it. Knowledge told her immediately that this situation was wrong. Even as a prodigy, she knew that if things turned violent, she would struggle. Moments later, it came. A formal witch walked down the path toward them, steps measured and professional. White robes trimmed in gold gave the unmistakable authority of the Emperor's coven. The face was older, normal enough at a glance, pointed ears, brown hair pulled neatly into a ponytail. The whole look was probably stolen from one of its victims. Naruto and Amity noticed it before it noticed them. When it finally did, something in its posture shifted. Not fear, not quite, but tension. A predator realizing its prey was looking back. Still, it didn't abandon the ruse. It continued forward slowly, calmly, the way an inspector would. When it stopped, it left a few feet of space between them, deliberate, calculated. The distance felt chosen for something Naruto couldn't immediately place. What is the meaning of this? It asked after a long, winding pause. The tone belonged to someone used to authority, someone who expected obedience and hadn't yet accepted resistance. I was told I would enter with a direct invitation from Principal Bump himself. It continued, voice smooth. To show off, some of the students. Naruto didn't miss the way its eyes flicked past them, toward the school. It meant appetizers. Naruto spoke first. Sorry, he said flatly. The meeting will be taking place out here. He stepped just enough to block the path. You're in no condition to be looking at students. So you don't need access to Hexside. As he spoke, Naruto sniffed the air subtly. One final check, he didn't need to draw this out anymore. With his fox senses, the smell was unmistakable. Magic, but not the ambient kind that clung to witches naturally, and not the sharp flare of a spell being cast. This was denser, thicker, the energy contained inside the bio sac of a witch. But more abundant, layered, wrong. That was his tell. His muscles tensed, just barely. He still didn't want to fight. If he could send this thing away without breaking it apart, or worse, he would. Maybe ask kindly for its blood. Besides, he and Amity weren't fully prepared. If a fight broke out, they had no reliable way to counter magic absorption. The thing didn't need to know that. What do you mean? It asked again, a sharper edge creeping into its voice. Is this a joke? The worry was there now, carefully hidden. I came here to inspect, it said. If Bump is truly fine with turning me away, it took a step forward. Naruto and Amity didn't move. No leeway. The witch let out a low, gut-wrenching sigh, the sound a predator makes when its prey dares to stand up to it. How disappointing, it murmured. I was hoping to do this inside. Maybe eat that wonderful magic inside the students, and taste a new flavor I wasn't expecting. Its gaze lingered on Naruto a moment longer than necessary. Naruto frowned slightly, not liking that. But I suppose my feast couldn't go unnoticed forever, it continued. That doesn't mean I'll leave. Its mouth twisted into something closer to a grin. I'll go through with my plan, you two will just be the first among many. A growl rolled out of its chest. Then it shifted. Unlike Naruto's transformations, sometimes violent. sometimes natural. This was wrong. Its skin rippled as if the scales themselves were flipping inside out, colors rearranging like pages being turned. Spots shifted first, then the eyes, then the size and shape of the body itself. The inspector vanished. In its place stood the basilisk. A massive beast, nearly the size of a small house. Smooth, gleaming scales reflected the light. Its head was snake-like, framed by sharp-pointed ears and a long, lizard-like neck. Two long arms ended in clawed hands, its lower body extending into a thick, vicious tail, gray scales, black hair, rows of sharp teeth, dead, black eyes. It roared. They moved. Naruto summoned flames from his seal, forming a barrier just as the tail whipped toward him and Amity. Amity reacted instantly, conjuring a spell circle and launching a swarm of hardened abomination needles. The basilisk opened its mouth. The attack vanished into the darkness of its throat. "We didn't think this through enough," Amity muttered. "It's kinda too late to make that observation, Mittens," Naruto shot back. Another tail strike came, this time from above. Naruto scooped Amity into a bridle hold and leapt away. The tail crashed down where they'd been, the impact cracking the ground with a thunderous boom. As the dust settled, the basilisk lunged midair, claws thrusting forward like spears, ready to tear them apart. Naruto blocked in midair, twisting and spinning into a kick that knocked the attack aside. Still being carried, Amity conjured a larger swarm of abomination needles, followed immediately by a blanket of flames. Like before, the basilisk simply opened its mouth. The attacks faded into the dark within, and it snapped its jaws shut with a wide grin. "Oh," it purred. "So tasty, that young girl's magic makes me want to scream." "Weird," Naruto said bluntly as he landed on a nearby tree branch. "Oh, shut up," it snapped. "I won't let a sample talk to me like that." The basilisk surged again, not to counter, but to attack outright. It lunged forward, jaws snapping. Naruto leapt, leaving it with nothing but a mouthful of broken sticks. He landed behind it and set Amity down before summoning flames again, this time shifting with them. His arms partially transformed, half fox, half human. Orange fur spread over his limbs as fire coated his fists. He threw 3 punches. With each one, his arms stretched unnaturally, reaching across the distance. The first hit dead on, slamming the basilisk into the dense trees lining the path. The second drove it even deeper. The third, it caught. Amity reacted instantly, conjuring a large spell circle beneath the basilisk and launching it upward before it could react. Naruto tore his fur-covered arms free. Flames gathering again as the beast fell toward him. The fire swirled into a familiar orb. Flame style, tailed beast bomb. The attack connected. The basilisk was hurled back through the forest, snapping trees, flattening others, before crashing onto its back with a roar of pain. Naruto straightened. "Think that was enough to take it down?" Amity clenched her teeth. "From its size, it's a greater basilisk. So it's most likely resistant to magic, no. But it definitely hurt." "Figured," Naruto exclaimed, "damn freaky deaky snake needs to learn we aren't food." Amity huffed a short laugh, then her expression hardened. "You two are so cute," it drawled. The word wasn't playful this time. There was no teasing lilt to it, only anger, sharpened by a quiet, simmering hate. Branches cracked as the basilisk began to rise again. The forest groaned around it as its massive body shifted upright. It lurched forward slightly, testing its weight, before straightening to its full height. Naruto raised his hands into a battle stance. The basilisk's eyes locked onto them as it spoke again. "Honestly," it hissed, "I don't understand why my dinner is fighting back so adorably." Its mouth stretched into a cruel grin. "You both can, just die already." It opened its jaws wide. The air warped. What followed wasn't a roar or a blast, but a violent pull, a vacuum. Naruto dug his heels into the ground as the force dragged at him, yanking him and Amity forward. They were strong enough to resist it, muscles straining as the path beneath them cracked. Then Naruto felt it. Something was leaving him. His eyes snapped down to his arms. Shit, he muttered. His chakra. The pull wasn't just physical, it was internal, ripping at something deeper. The seals along his arms flickered, glowing, dimming, before the magic within them unraveled. The markings faded as chakra was torn away in heavy chunks. Luckily, or unluckily, this thing could absorb chakra just like he'd theorized. His arms shifted back to normal as the flames vanished completely. A large portion of his chakra was gone. Enough to hurt, not enough to drop him. Naruto stayed on his feet, Amity didn't. His head snapped toward her just in time to see her knees hit the ground. Her skin had gone pale, breaths shallow and uneven. He could feel it, her magic being siphoned away far faster than his chakra had been. She fought to stay upright, hands shaking as she tried to push herself up. The vacuum finally stopped when she was barely holding on. Amity sagged, limbs nearly limp, still conscious only through sheer stubbornness. Naruto's teeth ground together. It had taken a massive amount of her magic. Far more than it had taken from him. Chakra loss weakened him. Sure, but it didn't hit his vitality the same way. For Amity, this was dangerous. If it continued, she wouldn't just be drained. She'd be helpless. The basilisk grinned as it slithered closer. That was delicious, it said, voice thick with satisfaction. And I finally found that new taste I've been looking for. Its eyes flicked back to Naruto. Chakra, it continued. That's what Emperor Bellows called it, right? I'm glad he freed me, all with the simple condition of killing a certain little fox kit. Naruto's eyes widened. What? Oops, the basilisk chuckled. Probably shouldn't have let that slip. It shrugged its massive shoulders. But who cares, you'll both be dead soon anyway. Naruto's thoughts spiraled. How did it know about chakra? He hadn't told anyone beyond King, Luz, and Ida, and even then, barely. What it said meant Bellows knew chakra, knew him. Knew what he was, what else did he know? The realization hit like a punch to the gut. And then the anger followed. A low growl tore from Naruto's chest, instinctive and raw, heat flooding his veins. Ah, the basilisk crooned. Is the fox boy angry because I hurt his little girlfriend? It leaned closer. Or are you more upset that I know your secret? Or better yet, that the Emperor does? Its smile widened. That must be terrifying. Knowing your secret is in the hands of a monster. Shut up, Naruto snapped. His voice rose, hate bleeding into every word. You Orochimaru reject. He glared at the beast, red eyes burning. Before the anger could take him further, Amity spoke. Focus Naruto, she said hoarsely. You can't let it get to Heck's side. He looked down at her. She was weak, barely holding herself upright, but alive, still fighting. That was enough. The basilisk didn't wait. It surged forward again, faster this time, both claws aimed straight for Naruto. Naruto scooped Amity up and jumped, high enough that the basilisk passed beneath them, slamming into the forest behind with a crash that splintered trees. It recovered instantly. When Naruto landed, it was already on his heels. 2 claw swipes came down from above. He moved right. Then left. 3 tail sweeps followed, he spun clean over them. The basilisk snapped its jaws in a massive, destructive bite. Naruto jumped, the force cracking the air beneath him. As he passed over its head, he kicked off it hard, using the momentum to put distance between them. He landed in a slide along the path, skidding backward toward Heck's side, Amity held tightly against his chest. His mind raced. He didn't have his seals, couldn't deal enough damage while carrying her. Normally, he'd overwhelm it, clones, tails, sheer numbers. But without the chakra it stole? He had enough for one more shift. One. And that wouldn't be enough to sustain a prolonged fight. Not the way he usually fought. Stop overthinking, he told himself, beat it into the ground. Naruto glanced down at Amity. You're hesitating, she said quietly. Whatever you need to do, do it. Kinda hard middens, he shot back, ducking a sudden tail strike. My hands are a little tied. He rolled just in time as the tail slammed down where his head had been. We'll get them untied, Amity said firmly. The Naruto I know adapts, to a duel, a beast, a situation. Her breath hitched, but she forced the words out. That's why I respect you, if you need to leave me, do it. It's more important to take it down. Naruto kicked a claw aside and leapt again. That's not the only problem, Amity. He landed, breathing heavier now. I don't have the chakra to do anything big. She didn't hesitate, didn't even blink at the word, despite him never explaining it. It doesn't need to be quantity, she said. It needs to be strong. She lifted her head slightly, eyes sharp despite her condition. It's resistant to magic, but physical attacks hurt it far more, that's why your flame-covered punches worked so well. Naruto stilled. Don't counter its absorption, she continued. Don't overwhelm it with numbers. Her gaze locked onto his. Overwhelm it with strength. Not magical strength. Naruto stared at her for a long moment. Then he moved. He leapt up into a nearby tree, landing on a thick branch just out of the basilisk's immediate reach. Carefully, he set Amity down, seating her against the trunk, making sure she was balanced. She was right. He needed to adapt. He wasn't used to relying purely on size, not like this, but with what he had left, he couldn't fight the way he wanted to. No drawn-out battle, no layered transformations. One shift. He inhaled slowly. Make it count. One shift. He'd better make it big. Naruto exhaled slowly. The basilisk had stopped just short of the tree, pacing in a loose circle below. Tail carving deep grooves into the dirt. Its eyes tracked him through the branches, patient now, confident. Naruto looked down at it. Then he spoke. You picked the wrong school, he said quietly, and the wrong fox. His chakra surged, not wide, not wasteful, but condensed. Every last usable thread pulled inward instead of outward. The air around him tightened, leaves trembling as if the forest itself sensed what was about to happen. Amity's breath caught. Naruto's body began to change. Not the twisting, layered shifts he normally favored, no partial forms, no experimentation. This was direct, brutal, purposeful, the form closest to what he truly was yet. Orange fur darkened, then exploded outward in a violent wave, shredding bark as his frame expanded. Bones cracked and reformed, muscle stacking upon muscle as his silhouette tore free of humanoid limits. His fox eyes became more crimson than red, slicker, encased by pitch-black fur only found around his eyes and extending to his ears. Said ears stretched and sharpened, much longer like a hack rabbit's. Jaws elongating into a massive muzzle lined with glowing fangs lined by black lips. Tails erupted from his spine, 1, 2, 3, then all 9 at once, unfurling like living whips of fire and shadow. He fell to the floor before the tree splintered beneath him. When Naruto hit the ground, the impact shook the path hard enough to knock loose stones from the cliffs beyond Hexside. The nine-tailed demon fox stood where the boy had been. Bigger than the basilisk. Not towering, dominating. Crimson eyes burned like coals set deep in a vast, burning skull. Flames crawled along his fur, not wild, but controlled, heat coiled tight against muscle and sinew. The basilisk froze. For the first time, genuine fear bled into its posture. What? Naruto roared, not in rage, in declaration. He lunged. The ground gave up beneath him as he crossed the distance in a heartbeat, jaws slamming shut around the basilisk's neck before it could react. The beast shrieked as Naruto whipped his head sideways, lifting it clean off the ground and hurling it through a line of trees like a thrown boulder. Wood exploded. The basilisk barely had time to recover before Naruto was on it again, a titanic fist crashing down onto its chest, pinning it hard enough to crack ribs. The impact forced the air from its lungs in a choked hiss. It lashed out, claws raking across Naruto's side. The strikes landed, they hurt, but they didn't stop him. Naruto slammed his forearm down, then again, each blow a physical storm, backed by raw mass and momentum. The basilisk tried to absorb, mouth opening instinctively. Nothing happened. No spell, no energy, just bone meeting bone. Naruto bit down on its shoulder and ripped, tearing scales free in a spray of dark blood. He flung the chunk aside and followed with a full-body charge, driving the basilisk backward, straight through the forest edge. They crashed into the clearing in a tangle of limbs. The basilisk screamed, magic leaking from it in visible distortions now, wisps of stolen energy forced loose with every impact. Purple abomination residue, raw spell light. And then, Amity's magic. It snapped back to her like a drawn bowstring. She gasped sharply as color rushed back into her face, strength flooding her limbs. The ache faded, replaced by a warm, buzzing presence she knew intimately. Her magic was back. Naruto felt nothing return. The chakra tore free of the basilisk and dispersed uselessly into the air, fading without as it was already spent, and his seal didn't return either. He didn't slow down. He finished it. Naruto reared back and brought both fists down in a crushing blow that caved the basilisk's skull into the dirt. The beast spasmed once, then went still. Silence fell. The flames along Naruto's fur dimmed. His massive form shuddered, then began to shrink, tails dissolving into embers as bone and muscle folded inward. When the smoke cleared, Naruto stood there again in human form, breathing hard, scorched and scraped, but standing. He walked over to the corpse. Quick, efficient. He knelt and cut into the basilisk's side, collecting dark blood into a small container pulled from his pocket, enough to remake what he'd lost. He stood and turned toward Amity. She was already on her feet, shaky but upright, eyes wide. "You okay?" he asked, like he hadn't just turned into a living disaster. Amity let out a breath that was half laugh, half disbelief. "I should be asking you that," she said, then, softer, "My magic, it came back." Naruto nodded, "Good." She noticed his arms. The seals didn't. "Nope." He shrugged, wincing slightly. "Chakra'll come back on its own. Seals won't though. This basilisk did save me a trip to get a tattoo removal, and it probably saved me lunch too." She looked past him, at the basilisk. "You're really going to eat it?" "Later," Naruto said. "Gotta make sure it stays dead first." They stood there for a moment, the aftermath settling in. Then Amity spoke again. "What it said," she said carefully. "About the Emperor." Naruto's jaw tightened. "Yeah." Bellows knew. Not just about chakra, about him, enough to send a greater basilisk specifically tuned to absorb it, enough to give it orders. "Kill the fox kit." Naruto stared at the corpse. 7 years ago, that was the only time Bellows could have found out, when he first got to the Boiling Isles. Bellows wasn't just a distant threat anymore, he was doing something more than just hunting Ida or putting order to Bones Barrow. Naruto flexed his hands slowly, eyes dark. "Guess it doesn't change much," he muttered. "I was already a target because of my years with Ida, this just might change the reason." But whatever Bellows thought he was dealing with, he was wrong, and Naruto intended to make sure the Emperor learned that the hard way. That's it for today. I hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe, and comment ideas if you can, and maybe you could share this with your friends, because you never know, they might like what ifs too. So without further ado, All Kage, out.